Welcome to the Federal Youth Network's virtual learning series. Please note that this session will be offered in English for the first 30 minutes. The French session will immediately follow at 2 p.m. Veuillez noter que cette session sera offerte en anglais pour les premières 30 minutes et que la présentation en français suivra à 14 heures, heure de l'Est. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm here on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, and I encourage all of you to acknowledge the land you are on as well. As we move through today's session, please share your comments in the chat space and questions by using the Q&A button in the language of your choice. You can vote for the questions you like by clicking on the thumbs up button. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Khadija to present herself.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Khadija. I'm an analyst at the Department of Innovation, Science, and Economic Development, and I will be your moderator for today's session. So we will be learning more about GC Pay today, our pay stub, when do we get paid, etc. And so I have the pleasure of introducing Dirgham Shahruri. Dirgham is a trainer at the Client Contact Center in the Pay Administration Branch of Public Service and Procurement Canada. Dirgham, take it away and tell us all about GC Pay.
Thank you very much, Khadija. Hi everyone, so I will be giving you guys a small training about pay. So we're gonna go ahead and go through the PowerPoint together. So first off, I would just like to start by saying that if you do have any questions during the presentation, please save them towards the end, and we will do our best to answer some of your questions that you've posted in the Q&A. And if you have any questions that are personal, unfortunately, we won't be able to answer those, but you can always call the CCC, and we'd be happy to help you out if you were to give us a call. If we can go to the next slide. So this is what I just mentioned about the questions. Perfect. So just an overview of what we're going to be doing. So we're going to look at different things within my GC Pay. And one thing we want to mention before we go ahead into the systems is we want to make sure that everybody verifies their pay stubs whenever you get a chance. So start getting into the habit of verifying your pay stubs every week. So we get a pay every Wednesday, every second Wednesday. Take the time to check your pay stub. When you do verify your pay stubs, you'll be able to identify any pay issues that arise. You'll be able to identify anything that's off or anything that doesn't seem normal. And that way, we're able to find the pay issues early on and hopefully have them fixed. So it's just one thing that we want to mention before we get into the training, is that we are all responsible, myself included, to always verify our pay stubs to make sure that if there's anything that's not correct, we're able to contact the right person in order to help with fixing the pay issues. All right, so some of the things that we're going to go through today, we're going to understand where to find the pay stub online. So we're going to talk about my GC Pay. We're going to look at the deductions that you see on your pay stubs, the tax deductions that you also see on that as well. We're also going to talk about the CPP, which is the Canadian Pension Plan. We're also going to talk about increments. So we're going to talk about how increments work and when do they happen. And we're also going to talk about any fluctuations that you may have in your pay. So anytime that there may be an increase or a decrease in your pay, it doesn't mean that there's a mistake. It could be something normal. So we'll talk about that. And then finally, we'll talk about ESAs, which is the Emergency Salary Advance. All right, so let's start with the where. Where can we find our pay stubs? So the pay stubs can be found in My GC Pay. Everybody has access to My GC Pay. My GC Pay is a web tool that was created for all federal government employees, and it was created to give you a simple view of your pay and your benefits information. It's very easy to access it, and it's very user-friendly as well. When you do use My GC Pay, you can view your current information about your pay and your benefits. You can print documents such as your tax slips and your proof of employment. You can also monitor any open inquiries or cases that you have with the Pay Center. So if you've ever called the client contact center, or if you've ever submitted a request through the Pay Center, you can actually look at those requests that you've submitted and those inquiries that you've submitted, and you can see the status of these inquiries, and see if there's any updates on them as well. You can also see any historical information related to your paychecks, your benefit plans, your tax slips, inquiries, and your inquiries that you've submitted. So there's a lot that you can find within MyGCPay. Now, keep in mind that MyGCPay can only be accessed through the internal network, meaning that you have to use your MyKey and you have to be connected to the government network in order to access it. So here we have a screenshot of what MyGCPay looks like as soon as you log in. So like we said, you do need to be connected to the internal network in order to access MyGCPay. Keep in mind that every department has a different way to access it, so I can only tell you about how I access it. I work with Public Services and Procurement Canada. So for us, we have a application called EHR Tools. We click on that application, and then I have all of the systems that I can go through, such as MyGCPay, MyGCHR, and so on. So look at one of your applications on your desktop. You should have a way to access MyGCPay. If you are unable to find it, what I could recommend is once you've logged on to the government network, open a Google web page, type in MyGCPay, and you should be able to access it through there. And then one last thing that I want to mention for those that are logging into MyGCPay for the first time, there is a tutorial that you can follow when you log into MyGCPay for the first time. So take the time to go through the tutorial as well. Okay, so we won't go through all of the tabs within MyGCPay. We're just going to be talking about the Pay tab. There is another tab, which is the employment, the benefits, and the cases and inquiries. But for the time being and the limited time that we have, we'll just talk about the Pay tab. So if you do click on the Pay tab, you'll be able to see your most current pay stubs. You'll also be able to see any pay stubs that you've had that were paid out to you dating back to 2016. All right. And so when you open your pay stub, here's what you're going to be seeing. So we'll go through this together. So on the top left, you have number 1. What you'll be seeing is the pay date. So this is the date where your pay is going to be deposited into your bank account. Number 2, you have the pay period. These are the days that you worked, and those are the days that you're getting paid for. Number 3, you have the gross, you have the taxes, the deductions, and the net pay. So this gives you a summary of your paycheck, tells you what your gross is, so everything that you've been paid. It'll tell you how much taxes you're being deducted. And then within that tab, the taxes, that includes the CPP, it also includes the EI, and also provincial tax as well. And then within the deductions, this is where you have your benefits. So you're going to have your pension, you're going to have your DI, public service healthcare plan, dental care plan, and union as well can be found within the deductions. And then if you have any other additional deductions, such as overpayments, those can be found in there as well. And then finally, you have your net pay, and that is the amount that's actually going to be deposited into your bank account. So this is how much you're actually getting paid. Number 4, you have the employee information. So very general, just has your name, your PRI, information about your department. Number 5, you have the check information. So over here, it'll give you the check number, and it'll also state the status of the check. So usually if it says confirmed, that means the paycheck has been received and it should have been deposited into your bank account. Number 6, you have the bank information. So that will be your personal bank information. And it'll also state how the pay was delivered. So if it says direct deposit, that means it was deposited directly into your bank account. And then we go to 7, 8, and 9. Just want to talk about those 3 before I go into each one of them. So 7, 8, 9 are separate tabs. If you click on one or the other, it's going to change the information that's going to appear in 10 and 11. So for example, if you click on number 7, it'll show you the earnings under it. If you click on number 8, which is the taxes, number 10 and 11 will show the taxes. Same thing if you click on number 9, 10 and 11 will show you the deductions. So number 7 is the earnings. So this is everything that you've earned, everything that's being paid out to you on this paycheck. Number 8 is your taxes. So like we said, you have a breakdown of your taxes here. So it's going to include the CPP, EI, and then your Canadian income tax. And then number 9, you have the deductions. Like we said, this includes any deductions aside from the taxes. So pension, public service healthcare plan, it really includes all of your benefits, including the unions as well. And then number 10 and 11 are really just a summary of the of those 3 tabs that we just talked about. So number 10 usually will have the year-to-date earnings. So it'll show you the year-to-dates of your earnings, your taxes, your deductions. Number 11 will be an itemized list of your earnings, your taxes, and your deductions. So it's really going to break them down one by one, depending on which tab you're in, right? Whether you're in the earnings tab, the taxes tab, or the deductions tab. And you're always going to have, so for number 11, very important, you're always going to have a code, which is a code associated to either that earning, the taxes, or the deductions. Then you'll have the definition of that code that'll be on the right of it. It'll also tell you the duration, the hours, the rate, and the quantity. So number 11 is very important because it really breaks down exactly what you're getting on your paycheck. All right. And so when it comes to reading your pay stubs, like we said, so really just a summary of what we just talked about. We just talked about the earnings tab, the taxes tab, and the deductions tab. So here really we're just repeating a few things that we've mentioned. So the tax tab will show you the amounts that you are paying towards your Canadian income tax, your employment insurance, your CPP, Canadian pension plan, plus any additional taxes that you may subject to. Now, keep in mind your taxes are based on your place of work. So if you reside in Ontario, then you will pay taxes based on where you work. If you reside in Quebec, if you work in Quebec, sorry, then you will pay taxes based on where you work, which is Quebec. So it's very important to remember that. And then the other tab is the deductions. The deductions tab will show you the amounts that you are paying to your different benefits, and it'll also include what your employer is contributing as well. So you'll see different benefits such as your pension, your healthcare, dental care, your disability insurance, your union dues, and like we said, any other deductions that you may have will appear under that tab. That may include overpayments or deficiencies that you've accumulated throughout the years. All right, so when are we going to be getting paid, and how do we get our funds, and how much are we getting? So we get paid every Wednesday on a bi-weekly basis. So every second Wednesday, we get a pay, and our pays are what we call in arrears. So the government, the way it works is that we receive a pay for the hours that we've worked 2 weeks in arrears. And that's why we say that our pays are behind, because the days that you're working, you won't get the pay for it until 2 weeks after. So every second Wednesday, you will receive a pay deposited directly into your bank account. And keep in mind that we're being paid in arrears, meaning that the payment that you're getting is for days that you've worked 2 weeks in the past. Now, everybody within the federal government will get paid via direct deposit, meaning that the pay will be received through your bank account. Generally speaking, nobody should be receiving paper checks, but there are, in certain circumstances, some people that may receive paychecks. And also, if there's any errors with your direct deposit information, then a check will be sent out to you by mail. But generally, you should be receiving your pay through your direct deposit. And you should already be aware of how much you're going to be receiving. Always take a look at your letter of offer so that you're aware of what your salary is, what your hourly rate is, and that way you can identify any errors the moment you receive your first pay. All right. And so what if something's wrong with my pay? You need to identify that by going through your pay stub. Take a look at your taxes, take a look at your deductions. So again, like we said, everyone pays taxes, and they're used to help fund the public services and allow you to take advantage of them. Taxes at the Government of Canada are usually deducted from your gross pay. And like we said, your taxes are going to be based on where you work, right? So it's based on the province that you work. Everybody working within the federal government will pay the Canadian income tax, employment insurance, the Canadian pension plan. Now, for those that work in Quebec, you have additional taxes that will appear on your pay stub, such as the Quebec income tax, the Quebec sales tax, Quebec insurance plan, and Quebec pension plan. So it's very important to remember that if you are working in Quebec, you are going to get additional taxes versus if you're working outside of Quebec. Now, for the deductions, like we said, you have a very detailed list of your deductions within the MyGC Pay. And so take advantage of that. Look at all of those deductions. See why you have those deductions. Are you entitled to those deductions or not? Most of the benefits that we have are based on your contract. So depending on whether you're eligible or not, it might be a reason why you may have a deduction, or it may be a reason why you don't have it. So, and if you're not sure, feel free to give us a call and we can look into it and see why you are getting some deductions and why you're not getting some of them. All right. So I've already spoken about some of these deductions, but we'll go through a little bit more details. So like we said, PSSA, which is the pension, this is paid by all of the employees if you become eligible to it. Generally, to become eligible for the pension, you have to work for more than 6 months within the federal government, or if you have a contract that's more than 6 months, you might be eligible to the PSSA. The supplementary death benefit, this is a benefit that is again, admissible to employees if they have a specific contract, which is similar to the one for the pension. And basically for the supplementary death benefit, what it is that in case of a death where the federal employee passes away, well, the beneficiary, so the survivor of the family for the federal employee, gets a supplementary death benefit, which usually is double the salary of that employee. Disability insurance, long-term disability, so that's the DILTD, is an insurance that is available to employees if at any time they become ill or they are unable to work, they can take advantage of that insurance. PSHCP, that stands for Public Service Healthcare Plan. Again, depending on your contract, like we said, you might not be eligible to all of these benefits. It depends on the contract that you have. So the healthcare plan is a benefit eligible for employees who can take advantage of it and use it for different type of insurances that they would like to use. You have the dental care plan, same thing, and then you have the union. So these are the benefits that you'll usually see on your deductions. Like I said, you may have some of them, you may have all of them. It really depends on whether you are eligible for it or not. All right, so we're going to go through a few questions. We'll start with the CPP. So like we said, CPP is the Canadian Pension Plan, which you can find in your tax section. So CPP provides income replacement to contributors and their families in the event of retirement, disability, or death. Now, you're always going to be paying CPP at the beginning of the year until you've reached the yearly maximum. And so what happens is that a lot of times when we get to the month of October, the month of November, we'll see that CPP no longer appears on our pay stubs. And that's because you've reached the yearly maximum. And so you don't have to contribute anymore. And so what you'll end up seeing is that your paycheck will be a little bit higher because you're not contributing to the CPP anymore. So keep that in mind. Always towards the end of the year, you might not see CPP anymore on your taxes, and that's because you may have already reached the yearly maximum. For 2023, the amount is 3,754.45. So that's the yearly maximum, or it's 5.95% of your salary less a 3,500 exemption. So it depends which one is higher, and that's going to be the maximum for the year 2023. Keep in mind that they change year to year. So next year, 2024, the yearly maximum might not be the same. So if you do want to verify what the amount is, you can go ahead, again, open a Google page, take the time to research it. If you just type in CPP yearly maximum, it'll give you the information you need. All right. And so again, this is something that we've kind of touched on throughout the presentation. Why is my pay different this time? So like we said, there are many things that can impact your pay. When you have a change in your pay, it's not necessarily a mistake. It could be something that is normal. It could be a change in your pay. And so it's not always an error. So here we have a few examples of different things that can modify your pay. So The ones in red that we have here, these are things that are going to minimize your pay or make it less than what it usually is. The one in green are items that are going to increase your pay. So if you become eligible for a benefits plan or for one of the deductions, obviously your pay is going to be less because now you're going to be contributing to one of those benefits, right? And this is something that's completely normal, right? If you become eligible for pension, you have to start paying into it, and so your pay automatically will decrease. If you take a leave and you're not earning leave credits, if you have an overpayment, right, that is less than 10% of your gross pay, it's going to be recovered from your pay. If you have any deficiencies from your benefits that are being recovered, all of these situations will decrease your pay. And again, like I said, it's not necessarily that there's a mistake. It could be normal, a normal event that happens on everyone's pay, or it could be something that you might need to look into and possibly reach out to see why it happened. Now, with the increases to your pay, there are 2 months every year where we have what we call a PP plus, which is a pay period plus. So 3 pays in a month. We just had one in the month of March of 2023. We had 3 pays. And so what happens is when you have 3 pays, you don't have to pay all of your deductions on those 3 pays. Your deductions are usually divided on 2 pays, which means that third pay that you're getting will usually not have any deductions on it except for the pension. And so yes, your pay will be higher. And again, if you receive any step progression, if you receive an increment, these things will automatically increase your pay. And it's a normal step that happens throughout everybody's career within the federal government. Okay, so we just talked about increments. Increments are step progressions, and they happen every year based on your collective agreement. Take the time to look into it. But the moment that you're hired, usually that will be your anniversary date. So I'll give you guys an example. If you're hired January 1st, 2023, generally for most collective agreements, again, you do have to look into your collective agreement because some policies are different. For most collective agreements, the anniversary date is 52 weeks later, which is a year. And so the next year, which would be January 2024, you would get an increment step. So you would jump from the first step to the second step of your collective agreement. So again, keep in mind some collective agreements may be different, and so you do have to do your due diligence and do your research to verify when the increment is. And so again, like we said, the pay increment is a jump from the first step to the second step or the second to the third until you reach the final step within your classification. Now, there is also what we call an increase within the cost of living. And so the increase for the cost of living usually has a specific date. And so basically what it is that the step that you're at, so here it's not an increment step, it's really just an increase for your cost of living. And so your salary is increased every year. Usually the year, like I said, is stated within the collective agreement. So you'll have the year where that increment happens, that cost of living increase happens. So again, you really need to identify your collective agreement. And we have so many, so I can't really tell you which one is yours. And before we move on from the increments, you can go into your MyGCPay account and you'll be able to identify your increment date within the MyGCPay, and that way you are aware when your next increment will happen. Okay. And so finally, if you have no pay, what should you do? If you ever run into an issue where you have not received a pay, meaning that it's Wednesday, you look at your bank account and you see that nothing was deposited, keep in mind that there are some help or some things put into place to assist you within that situation. So you can ask for an ESA, which is an emergency salary advance. You can reach out to your manager, reach out to someone within your HR, let them know that you have not received the pay and that you would like to have an ESA. What an ESA is basically your department will provide you with a payment, which is the emergency salary advance, and that is to help mend the gap. So it's really there to help you with the situation that you've run into. And so the payment can cover up to 66% of your normal biweekly gross pay. Always keep in mind that when it comes to ESAs, they are a great solution, but you need to read up on them. So take the time to look into what an ESA is, and make sure that you look at the different policies that involve the ESA. That way you are sure that this is what you want. And like we said, when you have a no pay situation, It could be a mistake. It could be that maybe there's an overpayment that's being recovered from your pay file. So always take the time to look at your pay stub and give us a call at the CCC and we'll be happy to look into it for you. All right, so that is all.
Thank you very much, Dirham. That was very informative. I certainly learned a lot. We do have some questions from our audience. So one question that we have is, what do we do if we want to know more specifically for each of us if the right deductions and the right amounts are being deducted?
Right. So in order to know that you have the right deductions, you do have to look into your letter of offer. So take the time to open your letter of offer, look at the contract that you have. Most of the deductions that you have or the benefits that you'll see are based on whether you are eligible or not. So if you do become eligible for one of those deductions, then it's definitely going to be there because some of them are mandatory, meaning that you cannot really escape from them. Once you become eligible for it, you have to pay. An example of that would be the pension, the supplementary death benefit, the DI, which is the disability insurance. So these are mandatory benefits. The moment you become eligible, you have to pay into it. So my recommendation would be take a look at your letter of offer and try to do a bit of research by going through the eligibility and see if this is something that you should have. And then again, I mean, you can always give us a call at the CCC and we'll be happy to look into it for you.
Thank you. And so one other question that we have here is that some of us notice that the amount of pay that we receive, every 2 weeks is always changing. Is there a reason for that?
Right. So generally speaking, your pay should not really vary that much every 2 weeks. It should be almost the same every 2 weeks unless there are changes going on your pay file. So if you're having a promotion, a demotion, you're transferring from one position to the other, you have a step increment, you have new deductions that are appearing, changes in your taxes. So generally speaking, your paycheck should be the same every 2 weeks. If there's a small difference, that may be okay. But if you see that there's a gap or there's a huge difference every 2 weeks from your pay, then maybe take the time to reach out to the CCC, have an agent look into it and see if there are any errors there. And maybe they'll be able to provide more explanations on it.
That's great. So again, we want to call the client contact center if we do have any questions. Another question here that we have is a pay raise. How do we know how much it is and how often do we get it?
For the pay raise, so usually the increment, like we said, is based on the collective agreement. So generally for most collective agreements, the pay increment is after 52 weeks. So it's based on the date that you're hired, and on your anniversary date, the next year, you would get an increment. Now, in terms of the increase, how much it is, you'd really have to go into your collective agreement. So take a look at your classification. For example, if you're an AS, then you would be part of the PA collective agreement, and then you can go ahead and look into that. Usually, the salaries are found under the Appendix A, and you can take a look at your classification and identify when your next increment is, and also what the amount is at the same time.
Well, thank you again, Dirham. This was very informative. I know I certainly learned a lot, and I'll pass it back to Olivier from the Federal Youth Network.
Thank you so much, Khadija. Thank you, Dirham. Super informative session. Thank you for joining us today. As a reminder, the session will be repeated. Comme rappel, la session en français débutera sous peu. Resources will be available on the wiki page, and the recording of this event will be available on our YouTube channel. Thank you.